I've now moved on to essentially the near final product. Now what you're looking at is where I got to approximately, I'd have to say, step 13 of an 18-step process. I know that sounds like a lot, but it's going to be well worth it. At least it was for me. So I hope I can move on here. If the next little bit sounds scripted, it absolutely is. I took the time to write out all my thoughts, and I'm going to explain it piece by piece. I wasn't able to follow the directions and how the manual was provided. I'm going to blame that against my lack of sewing skill. After a lot of trial error, most importantly using a massive amount of pins and patience, at the end I was victorious. Here are the best practices that worked for me. 1. Measure out each side of the shoulder point. If cut correctly, one side will be longer than the other. This is true for the main sleeve as well. For the captain and above pattern, size large, which is what this is, the distance between the center point and the rough edge will be 5 inches and 6 inches. So taking my tape measure, measuring here to there, that's roughly 5 inches. Going along the other side here, from there to there is about 6 inches. Which in turn, I know it's rough, but that is how things are going to pan out. Step 2, align the shoulder point matching the 6-inch sides together, or 5-inch sides, whichever you'd like. But at this point in time, I'm going to show you that each side is different. So from there to there, from that edge to that edge is 6 inches, approximately. And yes, I am using approximate here, and that's approximately 5 inches. So this is 6, that's 5, that's where these two would go. So align the shoulder point matching the 6-inch sides together. Match the raw edge of the shoulder point to the 3/8 seam allowance marking line. Now in this case, here is my 3/8 of an inch seam allowance marking line. So we're going to take my rough edge, we're going to measure this point, and we're going to start here, making sure that you follow up this edge with this edge. Now if you're wondering why this is pressed and lined like that, that's in a different step. So now, you've got these edges lined up. Now you're going to pin all the way along here. So you're going to pin, starting at one side so that you're keeping a uniform amount of pins and a uniform amount of tension along here. Once that's done, what you're going to do, because these edges are going to be even and uniform, second point, the curve of the shoulder joint as well as the arm scythe here, it matches, and that is really the most important thing. I know some people are going to say, well, your seam allowance here is showing, or there's extra room in between the stitching and the sleeve. You're right, there absolutely is. But if this is not in line here with that, there's no point carrying on. At least that's my opinion. Then what you're going to do is you're going to take your ruler and you're going to press it firmly right along that center quilt line, and you're going to run that center quilt line seam right along here, probably about 1 inch down, just enough so that you can follow it later on, whatever fabric marker you're using. But this one, I have a water-soluble blue marker that follows that straight point all the way down there. Carrying on with my actual notes, find your ruler. We did. Place the ruler on the center quilt line. Done. Mark a line down the center quilt line, extending past the shoulder point about 1 inch. So step 6, remove all your pins. Now from the V, which is, again, this is prior to being cut and pressed. From the V, which is here, the point of the V, you're going to take your ruler, and you are going to measure 3/8 of an inch from that point, and you're going to make a small incision. Take your scissors, go right in there, and that's going to be 3/8 of an inch, because that will measure up with your 3/8 of an inch seam allowance line, which will happen later. Step 8, cut the 3/8 of an inch marker point. Step 9, if marked already, you will have a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance running along the V fold, which is here. Fold your cloth over. Fold it over so that it's in line here, and it's in line here, and you're going to pin the HE double hockey sticks out of it. After that, you're going to go over to your ironing board and you're going to press. Don't pull this down, don't go over it. You're going to stretch, you're going to rip threads. Now the one thing that I did find very helpful, how-to manual, was they directed you to run just some stay stitches right along that point right in here. And that was to prevent this cloth from tearing down any further. Once again, pins and patience. That's who we are. That's what we do. So we have this folded. We have this cut. We're now going to take our shoulder joint piece. And here is the big part. Now you're going to take the raw edges, these raw edges of the shoulder joint, and you're going to match them up, line them up with the freshly pressed 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. And you're going to find that seam line, you're going to work with that. Now it doesn't matter which side you go. Again, folding over the raw edges, fold it over all the way, and then you match up all three pieces, holding them tightly together, making sure that your corners are flush. Now I'm going to be pinning along the lengthways, and that's just going to hold everything together, and you'll understand why as I move on in later steps. Okay, now that's all pinned. Now here's the great thing. As I'm going to go along, I'll flip this over. And as you can see, there's just a little bit of movement here. I can tidy that up after. But you've still got your seam allowances in line. You've still got the curves in line with each other. And that center quill point is still in line with this. So that is where I had to go. That is what I had to do on my own. Again, if you have this how-to manual and you know how to do this better than I, please make a video and show me and show the rest of us. It'd be really, really appreciated. Now that we're back in the machine, if you remember a little bit ago, I told you that it's extremely important to take your pins and pin them as high as you possibly can towards the top of that 3/8 of an inch seam allowance line. Here's why. What I'm going to do next is I'm going to switch my machine over to a basting stitch, and I'm going to run a basting stitch all along this seam underneath the pins. Okay, basting stitch done on both sides. We're going to go back to the mat. What this basting stitch is going to do is act as the pins. I'm going to de-pin, and then I'm going to show you how things are sitting with those basting stitches. So again, that's basted in there. That's just holding those seams together very loosely. I flip this over. Everything is still in line. The curves here are aligned. Again, so important to keep those curves aligned. Of course, our center peak is still aligned with the center point there. So yeah, it turned out better than what I had hoped. Also, like I said, please, if you know a better way, tell me, make a video. Next steps, I'm going to go back to the machine, and from here I'm then going to seal this with a proper straight stitch on the one side, do the same thing to the other side, and then I'm going to do some zigzagging stitches to close up the seams on either end, and that is going to be done for this sleeve.